In the entry of the violin shop, just beyond the straitjacket and pitchforks, is a cabinet, and today, an old tool chest filled with inspiration. These and most of the other items here in the entry are from the Romantic School of Music's archives. And they do get moved in and out and rearranged according to each visitor's needs. Because not only is each piece of wood that hangs from the ceiling different, every musician, and each master luthier for that matter, is different. And each one requires something unique to inspire them. For instance, since this is a tour of the violin shop, let's start with Antonio Stradivari himself. There's no question that his instruments have inspired millions of musicians over the past 300 years and possibly billions in the audience. Yet, did you ever stop and ask yourself, what could have possibly ever inspired a 14-year-old boy to pick up a set of carving tools and then dedicate the rest of his life to violin making? The answer to this question, possibly more than any other, is right here. It's an engraving created by Karel de Jardin in 1658. He was a Dutch artist who worked in Italy when Stradivari was just a boy. And it really was the perfect inspiration for him. This piece of paper is 359 years old and has been kept almost immaculate since the day it was created. No one knows for sure if this is the actual copy that inspired Antonio when he was 14, or if it was another one that he acquired later on. But either way, I'm sure that most museum curators are screaming at me right now because I'm holding it in my bare hands and not wearing cotton gloves. Yet, you know, at least once, there comes a time to take off the gloves, hold things in your hands, and experience them for real. This is the same debate between loving, playing, and appreciating the old master violins, the way they were meant to be, yet while also watching them slowly wear away over the centuries, or perfectly preserving them behind glass where no one can touch them, and so future generations can look at them in almost immaculate condition, yet always with their voices silenced. The catch-22 to the second part of the debate is that almost all of the instruments that spend their lives behind glass and are never played never are quite the same afterwards. I do love this engraving. Yet, isn't it amazing how some pictures, profound phrases, or even dreams can mean so little to others, yet be the perfect thing to inspire one person to greatness? The Romantic School of Music has always taught that while traditional teaching techniques and a lot of practice are necessary, they are not enough to succeed. It always takes something more, something that sparks the imagination and gives it life. The challenge for each teacher is to find out what that certain something is for each student. At the same time, never forget that sometimes all it takes is the dream of a puppy, or two, or three, and a violin. There have been hundreds of lifetimes and tens of millions of dollars spent trying to rediscover the lost secret of Stradivarius. And now I'm going to share this secret with you for free. You may ask, is it the wood? Yes. And the good news is that the greatest trees that have ever lived can still be found today. Is it the varnish? Yes. And it really is boiled dragon's blood and 65 million year old Baltic amber from the time of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's actually 100 of these so-called secrets that must be mastered in order to succeed in making a master violin. But the one greatest secret of all is this. Antonio Stradivari began carving his violins when he was 14 years old. He apprenticed under Niccolo Amati, the greatest master luthier who had ever lived up until that time. And after listening intently, learning all that he could, and patiently carving in Niccolo's shop for 8 years, he opened his own shop just a few blocks away. Stradivari then worked 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, was almost never sick, and almost never took a vacation. In fact, carving his violins, to him, was the best vacation of all. And every time Antonio Stradivari picked up his carving tools, it was his goal to create the finest musical instrument that had ever been made. And the secret? The real secret of Stradivari? Antonio Stradivari did not create his greatest concert instruments until he was over 60 years old. In fact, Antonio waited till he was 65 to make his own inlaid dream violin, the one that he first imagined with the little dogs running and jumping on its ribs. And his finest solo instrument for the concert stage, the one that Itzhak Perlman plays, Antonio was 70 years old. The Messiah, the most simple yet perfect and pure violin that he ever created, the one that he placed on his wall in a cupboard to protect it, he was 72. And the wonderful violin owned and played by Zino Francescatti, he was 83. Paganini's viola, Stradivari made it when he was 87. And Paganini's cello, Stradivarius was 92 years old. And even though Antonio's hands finally began to falter after making that instrument, he still picked up his carving tools each and every day and then created 15 more of the greatest concert violins that the world has ever heard. Then, at 93 years old, Antonio Stradivari took his last breath, laid down his carving tools, and died. This secret has been hidden away for way too long. And no matter how discouraging your life may become, or how long you think it might take you to realize your dream, never forget the secret of Antonio Stradivari. For some of the greatest things in life, it takes time. There isn't one perfect mold or form that can make all master violins. Like so many of the other wonderful things in art and music, the outline must change to suit both the two trees and the individual needs of each musician. Think of it this way. If you were about to attend the most important event of your life, and I were your tailor, would you be satisfied with a highly used, bright red maternity dress? Or for you women, Would a set of bright green, full-length tails, size 54, do it for you? Well, maybe yes, but probably no. So, why would you, if your dream is to become a virtuoso, settle for anything less than the perfect shape, the perfect color, and the perfect voice for your master instrument? Why not the one that you've always dreamed of, in every way? I do love and admire the old master instruments, and because of my own experiences with them, I possibly love them as much as anyone. Yet I have also seen too many musicians and collectors pay over $1 million for an instrument because it was the only one that they could afford, or the only one available when their finances were finally right. Then they spend the rest of their lives trying to convince themselves how wonderful it is, when it really isn't, at least for them. The goal of the master luthier has always been to get to know each customer and then fulfill their individual dreams. Yet at the same time, there are musicians who simply can't believe in a maker's instrument until they are holding it in their hands. This is one of the main reasons why Stradivarius has ended up to be the most famous master luthier of all, because he was willing to give up a little of this individuality without giving up any of the quality. Don't get me wrong, Stradivarius did make a few truly glorious and unique instruments. Yet, 9 times out of 10, you can hold up a Stradivarius, and just by looking at its outline, a little smaller, very elegant, and round, similar to Niccolo Amati's, definitely from the late 1660s or early 1670s. A little more height and more refined. Definitely a long pattern Stradivari from the 1690s. Or, shorter again, squarish yet bold, definitely from the late 1720s. On the other end of the scale is Joseph Guarnerius, with so many flavors and styles that until Jacques Francois came along, half of the authorities in the world were still arguing whether he was a cheap, eccentric hack or the most original, artistic genius of them all. In other words, the Van Gogh of violin makers. Well, Joseph Guarneri was a genius, and his violins are now worth, on average, twice the price of a Stradivarius. Regardless, all of the masters made unique instruments and used different molds throughout their lifetimes. Sometimes a new one each decade, and sometimes a new one every month. The challenge is learning what each small change accomplishes, as well as the interactions between each of the changes. Then, all of the interactions with all of the other variables that go into making a master violin, like the height of the arching, the thickness of the plates, the sound openings, and finally, the varnish. It can take a lifetime and cost a violin maker dozens of instruments. And by the way, Stradivarius, the most consistent and successful of the old masters, he burned over 80 violins during his lifetime going through this learning process. But as far as the mold itself is concerned, when all of the other variables are the same, as you move this lower bout out on the bass side, just 0.5 millimeter or so, the voice of the instrument becomes more cavernous. Yet, if you go a little too far, say 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters, its voice will become hollow, and the tone will have no core. It won't travel through the concert hall. Moving the upper bass side out 0.5 millimeter will make the instrument more strident and brilliant and sparkling. Yet anything over 1 millimeter and it will soon begin to sound like fingernails on the chalkboard. Moving the upper treble side out makes the instrument more flute-like. Yet if you go just a little too far, the instrument will start sounding like a cardboard box. A narrower waist will give you a quicker response, while a wider one will offer more power. Yet each of these characteristics interact with each other, and each of them does have a trade-off. Yet, can you really call it a trade-off if when you widen the waist for more power and volume, if the musician naturally draws a firm bow like Paganini did, or if you narrow the waist for a quicker response and the virtuoso draws a faster bow to achieve their volume like Sarasate, is it then a compromise? When it really comes down to it, what is the perfect form for the perfect violin? To the true virtuoso or master luthier, this question actually makes no sense at all. The real question should be, what is the perfect form of a violin for you? As you can see, I have many molds to choose from, as did all of the old masters. But the wood that I have chosen and the theme that will embellish this special instrument requires a new form that has never existed before. It is extremely close to the one that I used for the Spirit of 76, yet the waist needed to be just a little narrower, right next to the corner blocks.